Moving on to Jean-Claude Juncker's annual State of the Union address to MEPs in Strasbourg. The head of the European Commission said the EU needs a military headquarters to work towards a common military force. And almost 3 months after the UK voted to leave the EU, Juncker admitted the bloc was facing an existential crisis, but said, let's choose to look forward, be positive. Joining me now from Strasbourg, our European Affairs editor, Yves Irvine. Yves, what did you make of that speech?
The large reaction here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg is that this speech was a much less rousing one than the State of the Union speech given by Jean-Claude Juncker this time last year. Back in 2015, the speech came pretty much hot on the heels of the bailout agreement found for the Greek economic crisis. The EU had just decided to put in place this relocation system of the 160,000 migrants, mostly refugees, arriving into the EU. So there was a positive, if you like, very determined to-do list. The problem is, 12 months on, a lot of those issues are still on the table. You know, we've seen Greece still struggling economically, those refugees continuing to arrive. So there was less of that push of solidarity, a call, in fact, for more solidarity across the EU, and then a turn towards trying to show the positive things that are coming out of the EU, looking at the financial side of things, investment. Jean-Claude Juncker is saying that they were going to double this strategic investment fund from 315 billion euros to something like 500 billion between now and 2020, and that they would extend this because this, they said, was creating jobs, millions of them, in the last year or so. They also, something new on the list this year was this common defence format or grouping, a permanent position in the EU, calling for a European Union headquarters, as you said, and indeed a European budget on defence matters. This is all very new to the EU. This perhaps coming after the UK decided to leave the European Union. The UK always very anti any idea of an EU army and very vehemently vetoing that. So the other 27 now wanting to show that this is perhaps somewhere that they can move forward without the UK presence. And of course, Juncker also, alluding to that Brexit vote, saying he does not want the Brexit question to dominate another year of EU talks and processes.
Yves, he said solidarity can't be forced. Is that an olive branch to those opposed to refugee quotas?
He also said that solidarity was the glue that held the EU together, and he mentioned a number of smaller term solidarity movements across the EU, such as when there was wildfires in Portugal, it was Italian planes that came to aid and so on and so forth. But clearly his message was on this migration refugee crisis, of which we've seen so little solidarity across the EU. As we know, Hungary is gearing up to hold its referendum on October 2nd to ask its people whether or not they feel they should veto this idea of taking any refugees currently camped out in Greece or Italy. Slovakia, the current president of the European Union, has brought the EU to court just over the idea of a mandatory quota system. So a clear message to them. However, Juncker and indeed the Commissioner for Migration, who I spoke to just after the State of the Union speech, said it's not at all about punishing any particular member state. It's trying to convince them of this need for solidarity and the benefits of working together. And they believe they're getting closer to that. We'll just have to see. Time will tell.